And we are live. Greetings, faithful who are watching live, and greetings, all the faithful who are watching after the fact. Shout out to all the OAW patrons in the chat room right now. How are you guys doing tonight? I appreciate you all coming out on this Saturday night to join your boy. This is actually kind of funny. I wanted to hurry up and get this review out because I wasn't entirely sure when I'd be able to later this weekend. So I had a free evening tonight. So I was like, let's just go ahead and let's knock it out now. I actually wanted to sit with this film a little bit longer. I just finished watching it about 4 hours ago. So yeah, this is somewhat of raw first impressions for this film. But anywho, but as I said, I want to thank you all for joining me again tonight. And I will be giving you all another live review tonight. This is going to be my review of Us, the 2019 psychological horror film written and directed by Jordan Peele. So first and foremost, let me go ahead and special shout out to OAW patron Jonathan R., one of my blockbuster patrons at the OAW Patreon page. This was his request for a review for this month. So for those of you all who have yet to do so, feel free to check out the OAW Patreon page. If you all have a film, TV show, anime, comic, whatever have you, that you all want to request for me to review, check out the tiers on the OAW Patreon page. Find one that suits your fancy, and by all means, consider becoming a patron and pledging to get your request fulfilled next month. But so once again, shout out to Jonathan R. I appreciate you for becoming a blockbuster patron. Thanks so much. And we're going to go ahead. You know, he decided to request this film for review, and I timed it pretty good too, because this film just dropped on Blu-ray and DVD this past Tuesday, so now everyone can have access to it. Originally, I was planning on putting it out before the home release, but I didn't know how many people had digital, like Amazon. Who else has it digital? Vudu. I wasn't sure how many of my viewers use those platforms, because prior to this past Tuesday, that was the only way you could get a copy of the film, was to purchase it digital. But it is available on Blu-ray now, so everyone can go out and they can check it out and get themselves a copy. So anyway, so yes, so without further ado, let's go ahead and let's jump into this review, because I got my notes and yeah, got a lot to talk about. So first off with the introduction. Now, as I mentioned before, Us, this is the 2019 psychological horror film given to us courtesy of Monkey Paw Productions, Perfect World Pictures, and Universal Pictures. This film was written, produced, and directed by Jordan Peele of Get Out and now the Twilight Zone fame. And it stars, let's go down the list. Number one, Lupita. Bear with me, girl, because that last name. Lupita Nyong'o. I believe I pronounced that correctly. Winston Duke, Shahadi Wright Joseph, Evan Alex, and then finally Elisabeth Moss. Now, real quick synopsis of what this film is about. So, during a vacation trip to their summer home, a family has a terrifying encounter with mysterious and dangerous doppelgangers of themselves. That is a synopsis in a nutshell, as much as I can give you all without any spoilers, all right? That's pretty much the premise and the setup for this film. We have an African-American family on their summer vacation trip at their summer home, and then one night a family of doppelgangers of themselves shows up and chaos ensues. That's about as much as brief of a synopsis I can give you all without giving away any spoilers. And with that being said, for the sake of this review, I will be doing mostly non-spoiler, but I may do some real small spoilers towards the end. And I'll also open the chat up for questions pertaining to the film at the end of the review. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into the story, the writing, and the themes. Now, the first note I have in terms of the story. Now, given the premise for this film, We're talking about, number one, this film does the typical home invasion story. That's one. It does the typical killer slasher slash survival story. So we're working in that subgenre as well. And for the most part, it is a make it till dawn type story until we get into the third act and find out that the conflict does extend into the daylight. But we are, for the most part, working with that survive the night type of plot. So in that regard, the film is pretty standard, pretty typical. I would say it is more of a homage than a retread, because you can sort of pinpoint specifically some of the horror films and some of the slasher films that Peele is paying homage to. I have read from some other critics of the film, there's Nightmare on Elm Street influence. There is The Shining influence. So there's some of those things there. I wouldn't go as far as to say that the film is breaking any new ground, but I will say this. If you are not a big horror fan, if you haven't watched a lot of slasher films, if you haven't watched a lot of psychological thrillers, if you're fairly new to that, especially for my younger viewers, like teenagers, you guys in high school who might just start seeing horror movies on your own, without your parents or anything like that, this is a good starter film for you. It's pretty good. It does what a lot of those films do fairly well that contribute to the subgenre as a whole. So, and I think, I could be wrong on this because I don't watch MTV anymore, but I think it won Best Movie at the MTV Movie Awards last week. Okay, I can definitely see why, because I could see how this film would be very popular amongst teenagers. Yeah, so this is definitely a good starter film for people wanting to get more into horror and want to get more into slashers. All right. Second note. So as I said, while the plot, the mechanics of the story, by and large, they're pretty standard, we do have a reveal and we do have a twist in the film. And unfortunately, I would say that reveal and said twist are very standard as well. That is one criticism I do have about that film. Those two things are fairly standard too. Like I said, even with our big reveal and with our big twist, we aren't breaking any new ground. This isn't we have commentary with those things, but it's not satirical. It's, this isn't Cabin in the Woods. It's not one of those big revelations that sort of change the narrative, and it doesn't change the overall message of the film. Not really. It gives us a little bit more depth. We get explanations as to what's going on. We get that exposition. But if you pay close enough attention to it, especially if you pay attention to the beginning of the film, a lot of that material was already foreshadowed. So it's like, I don't think any of this stuff is going to go over anyone's head. You know what I mean? It's pretty easy to follow. All right. Now I will say this. And once again, I'm trying to do very brief spoilers on this one. But I mentioned that this film does have a twist in it. All right. This is probably my biggest negative criticism about the film. And I'm just going to throw it out here right here and there. My biggest negative criticism about the film is the twist in question, because I believe that the twist conflicts with the internal logic of the film. And what I mean by that is, when we do get our reveal and when we do get our exposition, we are told why things are happening. We're told what we are told what went into those things happening. We pretty much get the lay of the land for the world in which this film takes place, and we get the foundations for the internal logic of said world. By the time we get that twist, and if you look at that twist and then you go back and you trace back to what we were actually told in the film, I'm not talking about what the intention of the film was. I'm not talking about what Jordan Peele intended to do with the film. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the material we're given from the characters. When you take that twist into consideration and then backtrack, there are some gaping holes in that logic. There are some gaping holes in that logic. And I will go as far as to say this. I think the reason why said gaping holes exist is because this film plays with two popular genres in horror, probably two of the most popular genres in horror. It tries to use both of those things. And I don't want to tell you all what they are, because then I'm giving away spoilers, but there are two very popular, and technically they're genres in and of themselves, even outside of horror. But there are two very popular genres that we often see in horror, especially in a lot of fantastical horror, right? Because usually with fantastical horror, that story is going to be one of two things. It's going to be based off of one or two things, right? Those two things don't necessarily blend too well. It's not as easy to pull the blending of those off. And funny enough, shout out to my man Hugo Strange, because he has a pretty concrete rule where he says, all right, in whatever story you're going to tell, when it comes to those two genres, it behooves you to pick one over the other, because the laws of those genres within a shared universe more often than not conflict with each other, and you can't do both. So you got to pick one or the other, right? I don't always agree with that, because we've seen other films pull it off and we've seen other stories pull it off, but it ain't easy. And I think Us tries to do both. It tries to have its cake and eat it too, and it didn't stick the landing. So that's my biggest criticism I'll say about the film right there. I understand I was being extremely vague. I understand I was being extremely vague by what I just said, but that's the best way I can explain it to you all without straight up spoilers. I might talk more about the film later, though. I'll probably wait, give it a week or two, let more people see it first, and then like later I'll do another hangout where I do talk about spoilers, because I think that the twist in this film is worth talking about in a little bit more detail. But from there, let's go ahead. Now that I've talked about the plot, pretty much, let's talk about the themes. All right. So to kick off this theme discussion, now, for the most part, by and large, whenever I review a film, especially if I'm seeing it for the first time, I have made it a habit to not look up other reviews that other people have done, for two reasons. Number one, I don't want their readings of the film to influence my thoughts, and because I want my thoughts to be as authentic as possible. And number two, I don't want to accidentally bite off of them. So if me and another critic come up with the same conclusion, fair game, ball game, right? Because I just went off of what my reading of the film was, right? For this film, however, what I did was I went ahead and I jotted down my notes, and then I went and looked at what other people were talking about it. And I'm pretty happy to say that the reading I took away from this film, the more popular critics, they didn't get the same reading. So we're pretty good. And for the sake of full, I guess you could say, well-roundedness, those critics in question that I'm talking about, their readings, I think, are valid as well. It's not a right or wrong thing. Like we all have our different interpretations of what we took from the film, and I can see why they came up with what they came up with. I see that. It's pretty good. But the biggest theme I came out of this film with is the quintessential question of nature versus nurture. That's the theme I came away with. And the reason for that is because this film brings into question the qualitative, I would say it brings into question the qualitative mechanics of being human. What does it mean to be human, right? And with that same question, it brings into play the question of the soul, right? What is a soul? Essentially, it is knocking on a lot of the same themes and questions that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein brought up with, right? But what's interesting about just like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and Us does it too, is once you bring up the question of what is it that makes a human, once you bring up the question of the soul, then we have to take that question into consideration and examine the characters we're given. When you do that, now I have to question nature versus nurture. Are the characters that we are presented with in the narrative, are they operating based off of the exercise of free will? Or do they have agency? That's the question. Do they have agency? Or are they simply operating off of pure nature, pure instinct, right? What motivates said characters? Because what we get in the film is we get characters that are familiar to us, right? Because they come from our world, all right? And because of that, we automatically have an affinity with those characters, right? Because, and especially for African-American viewers, right? Because number one, not only are the characters African-American, okay? Number two, we can tell based upon the introduction, they're middle class, right? Middle class. Yeah, they're not upper middle class because we have a comparison with another family in the film that is more affluent, right? But we're talking about barely lower middle class African-American family. But the biggest part is an American family, because the film does make it a point that these are Americans. This takes place in America, and the film is making a commentary on America. So because we have that, we're able to identify with our main characters. Once we're introduced to the doppelgangers, though, and we see the way in which they operate, and we hear, based off of what's said from them and about them, what their potential motivations could be, by the time we get to our reveal, and especially by the time we get to the twist, see, now I have to question, are the doppelgangers the way they are because of the manner in which they were conceived? Right? What made them the way they are in the first place? Because if those doppelgangers are meant to serve as a commentary about Americans, then what does that say about us? And then, and I'm gonna touch back on this towards the end of this review, because I will address what Jordan Peele said the central theme of the film was, which is something different than what I'm talking about. But I'm going to touch on that because part of me disagrees with his assertion, right? But I would argue, given the message that is conveyed in the film and the arguments, the questions that are brought up in the film, I think nature versus nurture is at the heart of it. Because if you're going to make a commentary about American culture, then we have to talk about, well, are we the way we are just by being born in America? Or is it the American culture that made us this way in the first place? Would we be the way we are if we were born in, say, South Africa, Johannesburg? And then if you're making a commentary about American culture, but is it just American culture, or does this expand to the Western democracies as a whole, right? So that means some of these things would come up in Australia, right? In the UK, right? Ireland, maybe. You see what I mean? So when you look at this, narrative, right? Because we do have a world in this film. When you take it out of the micro of the family and their doppelgangers, right? Because we find out that the conflict actually stems much larger outside the family. All right, now let's look at it at the macro. And that's where I think that the nature versus nurture thing really comes into play, not just for the doppelgangers, but also for ourselves. There's also, and here's another thing too. And this is a comment I have about the twist. And it's another criticism I have about the twist. There is a particular assertion made, and it's not stated in the film. It's done through the actions of some of the characters, that there actually is a default bad in the film. This is what I mean when I say default bad. For anyone who is into philosophy or anything like that, the default bad, and this is a term I'm just using. This is just a jingoism I'm using, right? This isn't the actual textbook definite term for what I'm talking about. But this notion of the default bad, as it pertains to the nature versus nurture debate, right? Meaning that if you take a human being from his root nature, right, completely independent of any influence from his environment, from the people around him, from his culture, country, all that jazz, the default bad would imply that human beings by our root nature are sinful, right? It's the original sin debate, right? That we are automatically sinful. If I'm to take this film literally, based upon what the characters do in this film, the film makes an assertion of a default bad. The doppelgangers, by default, are bad. But that's not true. That's disingenuous. That's not true. Because for anyone who has already seen the film, and for those of you all who have yet to see it, pay attention to what happens when the doppelgangers are first introduced in the film. They do not actually exercise violence until they are in a position in which they are provoked. They are not immediately violent, the doppelgangers of the main family. But there are other doppelgangers that we see later in the film. As soon as they're introduced, they are violent. There is also an exchange between two of the characters later in the film that talks about, when we get the origin, right, where the doppelgangers come from, what was their purpose, this is that and the other. And there is an assumption that the doppelgangers are nefarious. But that can't be, right? That's where the nature versus nurture thing comes from. That's why I said that has to be a theme in this film, because I have a hard time believing that that's the case when I have evidence in the film that suggests the contrary. But you're telling me it's the way it's supposed to be. And I can't help but feel like you're telling me that because I need to believe that in order for the plot to be able to work. But that's why I say, once you start questioning that, the internal logic doesn't hold up very well. And that contributes to the issues I have with the twist. That contributes to the issues I have with the twist. Is this assertion of the default bad, that people are just automatically bad from default before any type of influence is actually imposed upon them. And it's not just a matter of that I don't like that message. It's more so a matter of, if that is true, it doesn't hold up when I examine what else occurs in the film. All right. Okay. Water break. All right. All right. So now I'm done talking about the story, done talking about the story, done talking about the writing, done talking about the themes. Because, like I said, Mr. Peele's pretty much artist statement, right, about what the central theme of the film was, I'm gonna touch on that at the end. So next, I'm gonna talk about the characters, and I'm gonna talk about the acting. Breakout performance. I think this goes without question. Lupita, one of her best performances so far. She brings it in this. She's great. She's phenomenal. Definitely the standout. Just fantastic. And like I said, because this film deals with doppelgangers, our main characters are playing two different roles. What I'm saying is Lupita in both roles, both as Abby and as Red, which that was her doppelganger's name that was credited in the credits, was Red. So as both those characters, Lupita brings it. She's amazing. She's amazing in this. I would also say that the rest of the cast, by and large, they're good. They're good. I will say that the kids, Shahadi Wright Joseph and Alex, uh, the kids, typical performance. They Man, I don't want to sound too harsh. I don't want to sound too harsh on the kids. But here's the thing: like those kids are pretty much what we thought they would be. They don't really. Neither one of them, I thought, really delivered a standout performance. The way in which their characters are written are pretty typical, even stereotypical. You know, the teenage daughter and the weird younger little brother. We've seen those tropes in numerous films before. They kind of play out almost exactly the same way. So yeah, nothing really big there. But I will give Shahidi Wright Joseph. Wright Joseph. I will give Wright Joseph this credit, though. Her performance as her doppelganger, I think, is much better. Her doppelganger performance was really good. That one was really good, especially since, and this is probably the best thing I can say about the acting as a whole, there is a lot of physical acting in this film. And I'm not talking about the stunts, and I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the stunt work, right? Like the physically demanding work. I'm talking about no dialogue being said. I'm talking about the performance being delivered off of body language, facial expression. And to say that there are so many close-ups in this film, Wright Joseph, probably her, Lupita, and Moss, those three women, well, young woman and women, two women, what they do with their facial acting, really, really good. It's really, really good. Yeah, pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. Final note on the acting, though, I'm going to talk about my man, Winston Duke, who I'm a fan of. Been a fan of his since Black Panther. For those of you all unfamiliar with the actor, he plays M'Baku in Black Panther. And I thought he was the breakout performance of that film. Well, next to Michael B. Jordan. He was great. Here's the thing, though. He's good in this film, but just like the kid, he plays stereotypical horror movie dad. For that actor, I don't think he gets enough to do. Even his doppelganger is underwhelming. Because he is such a big guy, his doppelganger pretty much resorts to the, imposing brute, the imposing force, right? The brute strength of the group. But that's it. Dude, Winston Duke is much better than that. And to say, dude, he does, look, there is some levity in this film. Some of it's hit and miss. I think the kids' humor is the best. But even Winston Duke, even his comedic work, like, dude, he can do so much better. I don't know if it was the material. That dude is a funny guy. And I don't think he was able to stretch his comedic legs. I don't really think he was able to stretch his acting legs. Like, that dude is a good actor. I felt that he was restrained. I think he was. I don't think he was able to properly flex his acting muscles to the degree that I know he's capable of. I've seen him do it. He did it in Black Panther. So I just kind of wish he had more to do. You know what I mean? That's my only real criticism about the acting and the characters. All right. Now let's talk about cinematography. Let's talk about choreography. Now, cinematography, by and large, is pretty good. It's pretty good. It's what I expected from Jordan Peele, especially after Get Out. It's pretty much what I expected. What stood out the best in the climax of the film, there is what I would title, to give away no spoilers, the dance scene. And for those of you all who have seen this film, you know what I mean when I say the dance scene in the third act. That thing is shot phenomenal. That easily best scene in the film. That thing, wow. And in terms of the choreography, because in this scene, keep in mind what we're working with, right? 2 Lupitas. And I'm assuming probably for the sake of the choreography, one was a stunt double, right? But that choreography is on point, son. That choreography. And it took me a while to catch on to what they were doing with that. And I'm like, it's a dance. Like it's not just a choreographed scene. It's an actual dance that's occurring with them. Wow. Really well done. Really well done. The best shot scene in the film, the best choreographed scene in the film, the best scene in the film. I'm gonna drop this right here and there because I'm gonna segue into the music. The best score in the film. I'm talking about the score. I'm not talking about any of the music, like any of the songs that were used in the film. I'm talking about just the score. The best score in the film. 2 scores. Number 1, right before the reveal, and the dance scene. The scores in those 2 scenes, the best in the film. Phenomenal. Great. Oh, right. The tunnel scene, right? Because I said right before the reveal. So yeah, the tunnel scene and the dance scene. The score, the cinematography, the choreography, best 2 scenes in the film. All right. So now, like I said, segueing over to the music. So outside of the scores, the main song that's repeated throughout the film, because it's part of the score as well. I Got 5 on it. Or as the film's version, because you have the original I Got 5 on it, and then you have the film's version, which is I Got 5 on Us. Both of those songs, I mean, you're talking about classic West Coast hip hop in one. And then, of course, you're talking about a new rendition of it for the film. Both of them are great. The film's version definitely adds to the atmosphere. It adds to the, I want to say, gravitas of the film, because it's not like, the way in which that is used, both as the individual song itself, but then as part of the score throughout the film, it definitely it brings the chill factor, right? That's when the eeriness comes out, right? That, you know, we're talking about a real American horror story at that point, right? So both of those songs I thought were implemented very well in the film. All right, so now we're going to get to the final thing I wanted to talk about in the film, and that is going back to this discussion of themes. And I want to talk about Jordan Peele, what he said the theme of the film was. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because, and let me go ahead and let me make this claim right here and there. Now, for those of you all who have been following my channel, and for those of you all who have been watching my reviews and things of that nature, you know that by and large, the manner in which I critique a piece of work, right? Whether it's a film, a television series, an anime, a comic, hell, even if it's a video game, anything like that. More often than not, I will, while I will examine that piece of work as its own thing, I think it is also fair to compare it to other works in its family. And when I say that, this is what I mean. When I talk about a family, because it's one of the reasons why one of the main focuses of the channel is superhero films, right? Why? Because we have so many superhero films and we have so much superhero material. There are numerous things that I can take a superhero film and compare it to, right? Like I can take Spider-Man Homecoming and I can compare it to the Amazing series. I can compare it to the Sam Raimi series. I can compare it to the 90s Spider-Man series. I can compare it to Spectacular Spider-Man. I can compare it to the MTV Spider-Man. I can compare it to the video games. I can compare it to the comics. All of those things are its own different medium. But I'm talking about from a narrative perspective, it's fair game, right? Because it's in the same family. And when it comes to film, the same thing can be said about a filmmaker, right? Like I can look at Zack Snyder's filmography. Like I can compare Man of Steel to Watchmen. I can compare it to Sucker Punch. I can compare it to 300. Different types of films, but they are all Zack Snyder films. So when I am discussing Zack Snyder's work on Man of Steel, yeah, it's fair game for me to be able to go back and say, well, look what he did on 300. He did this on 300. Why? Because I am comparing that man's work to his previous work. And the same, and I've done this religiously whenever I've talked about, for those of you all who remember my anime reviews and my manga reviews, when I talked about Bleach, who did I compare Taikubo to the most? Himself. Who did I compare Masashi Kishimoto to the most? Himself. Because I was comparing the work they were making then to the work they had made previously, right? So with us, I think it is fair to compare it to Get Out. Two completely different films, yes, but same creator, same writer, same director, right? So same creator, same genre, because they're both horror. And once again, not to give away spoilers, but when you're talking about the subgenres, they actually even fall into subgenres, right? So it's fair game to compare this to Get Out. But if nothing else, it's fair game because this is Jordan Peele, right? Same creator, same writer. I want to preface this portion of the review by stating that because I don't want anyone to misconstrue where I'm coming from with the challenge of Mr. Peele's statement about the film. Because now we're getting to the point of, and this is textbook art criticism. Does the work accomplish the intention of its creator? That is critique 101. If nothing else, if you had nothing else to compare this film to, if Jordan Peele had never made another horror film, if he had never written another horror film, if this was something that we had never seen before, at bare minimum, compare the work to see how well it executes the creator's intention. All right. So this is what Jordan Peele said in regards to the theme of the film. And he said, and this is in the digital releases special features, that the central theme of this film was American privilege. And he stated, and I quote, "One of the central themes in us is that we can do a good job collectively of ignoring the ramifications of privilege. I think it's the idea that what we feel like we deserve comes, at the expense of someone else's freedom or joy. The biggest disservice we can do as a faction with a collective privilege like the United States is to presume that we deserve it and that it isn't luck that has us born where we're born. For us to have our privilege, someone suffers. That's where the tethered connection, I think, resonates the most." He's talking about the doppelgangers. They are referred to in the film as the tethered. That's their name. That's the name they coined themselves, the tethered. That's where the tethered connection, I think, resonates the most, is that those who suffer and those who prosper are two sides of the same coin. You can never forget that. We need to fight for the less fortunate. All right, Mr. Peele, ball game, sir. I see where his intention was. And there are points in the film where you can pinpoint said intention. This is where I think it was not properly executed. The comment on American privilege is somewhat obvious, especially when you see the different doppelgangers, right? Because we have the doppelgangers for our main family. We have doppelgangers for the supporting cast family. And then we have other doppelgangers that we find out about later on. But just within the two families, when you see the manner in which the difference between how the doppelgangers behave, I think that comment on American privilege at that point, that's where you pick up on it. I think that's where the film gets it right. But when you have the notion that one's privilege comes at the behest of another, first and foremost, that is not something that is exclusive to American culture. That is human nature. That is a fundamental truth of mankind. Since antiquity, there has always been the haves and the have-nots. That's why the fight for equality, that's why we've never had a quote-unquote egalitarian society. There's never existed one. Even when there was the guise of an egalitarian society in antiquity, it wasn't really. Even in Rome, there were elites. Even in ancient Greece, there were elites. So yeah, that the haves and the have-nots is something that has always existed. For those of you all who are for just to throw this out there, to give you all a frame of reference, okay? To give you all an example. For my Christians in the house, especially my literal ones, the first example of the have and have-nots that exist in the Bible is Cain and Abel. That's how old have and have-nots is. That's not American culture. That's mankind. That's humanity. It's just nature versus nurture, right? That is, But here's the thing. I wouldn't go as far as to say that that's necessarily nature versus nurture. It's just a fact of the world. It is just a fact of the world. Okay. Now, that's not to say that Mr. Peele is wrong in his statement that we need to look out for the less fortunate. He's not wrong. I'm not making the assertion that he's wrong. Of course not. Of course he's right. But what I'm saying is, I think the film doesn't stick the landing when you're making that statement. And here's the reason why. For those of you all who have seen it, we know, if you've seen the film, you know how the tethered were created. You know how they were created, and you know the purpose behind which they were created. Now, sure, if you think about it, that wasn't their fault, right? Because it's no different than a child being born, right? No child decides to be born into this world. You are a victim of circumstance, yes? But if that's the case, I think it's disingenuous to assume that just because someone is a victim of circumstance, that the person that benefits from that person's misfortune is responsible for putting them there. That's binary thinking, and that's disingenuous. Because we already know that with some of the characters in the film, they weren't responsible for the creation of their tethered. So then why should they have to suffer? Why should they have to suffer because their tethered suffered? That's not how that works. At that point, all you're doing is just spreading more pain because you suffered. You took it upon yourself to share your suffering of others, but those suffering are not responsible for your suffering. They might have benefited, but here's the thing. Those suffering didn't even know you existed. And not only did they not know you even existed, hang on, let me ask you all a question. How do you fix a problem if you don't know there's a problem in the first place? That's disingenuous. That's binary thinking. That's binary thinking. Now, if your comment is on our culture as a whole, okay, sure, fine. But dude, hang on. Jordan, let's be real about this, my brother. You and I, and I want to talk to Jordan directly because I know Jordan Peele has seen my videos before. Why? Because of the whole, Von Davion? That character was inspired by me. So I know Jordan's seen my work before, and I hope he manages to see this. Jordan, brother, I'm talking to you directly now. You and I are both African Americans, bro. We already know. We didn't ask to be here. Our ancestors never asked to be here. And yes, there were people who did benefit off of the suffering of our ancestors. We know that to be the truth. But guess what? Just because that happened then, I don't have no license to go up to a white man and share my ancestor suffering with him. He wasn't responsible for that. Did he benefit from it? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. But this is why I bring into question, this is why, in terms of themes, I keep going back to the nature versus nurture. Because when you go into the nature versus nurture, at some point in time, who is responsible for what that has to be identified. We have to examine that, right? Based off of what Mr. Peele said the central theme is supposed to be, if I am to take that literally, that means that the tethered are victims, which is true. But the people in which they terrorize are victims too. They are also victims. And guess what? Here's the thing though. They're not victims of the tethered. They are victims of the same systems that put the tethered there in the first place. They are victims of the same systems that created the tethered. Because remember why the tethered was created, right? Which is why the twist is very problematic. The twist is extremely problematic when you look at it in that fashion. Extremely problematic. So who's responsible for who's suffering? That's my question. Once again, to double down on this, and this is going to wrap up this final thought. Are Americans privileged? Of course we are. Of course we are. Do we often lose sight of that? Of course we do. Of course we do. But that is both nature and nurture. There are reasons for that. Does that excuse the fact that we do not look out for the less fortunate? No, that don't excuse it. That don't excuse it. But at the same time, at the same time, how can you fix a problem without addressing that there is one in the first place? And if your assertion is, well, people should just know better, bruh, they don't. And that is a truth. They don't. Because not everyone comes from where you come from, and not everybody thinks the way you think. And that is a fundamental truth. I can't assume that my neighbor is going to look out for me the same way I would look out for him, because we come from two different places. Even as Americans, we have different ideas of that. So, like I said, I think if you know, taking Mr. Peele at his word that is one of the central themes of the film, I do see traces of it there, but because of what we learn in that third act, if I take it literally, then it does conflict with the internal logic of the film. If I take it symbolically, then that means I have to take it with a grain of salt. So because that exists, I don't think the film does a good job at executing that message. I don't think it does. Now, I'll go ahead and I'll throw in some other things too, or some other things that some other critics said. Like one critic that I read said that it had more to do with classism. That one I definitely see. I see that one. Let me see. What was another one? Another one said that one of the themes, like it commented on the xenophobic nature of the other. That one's obvious. That one I think is a little bit more, that's one of the more obvious ones, right? That one, but like I said, see, these other things I think are valid, because I can see why these people, why they picked up on that, right? So that's another one I think is valid. And those two things, I think the film does really well. But it's that privilege one that I'm like, okay, but only so. That one I don't think is as strong as the other two. But let's be real about this. When we're talking about America, especially American culture, classism and xenophobia both are byproducts of said privilege. So when you think about it like that, hey, you know what? Maybe, okay, maybe I can see that. I can see that now. I can see that now. So maybe. But it doesn't change that damn twist. That twist is still problematic as hell. Okay, so final thoughts on Us, because I've been going at this for an hour now. So final thoughts on the film. Like I said before, when I talked about fair game in terms of of the sake of comparison. So this film not as good as Get Out. Not as good as Get Out, because it's not as, in my opinion, it is not as insightful. It does not have as much depth. It is much more, it's more vague and more ambiguous. And because of that, you can get all of those themes out of it that I just mentioned, right? Those themes are not mutually exclusive. One actually influences the other, as you all just saw me come to the realization of right here on camera. But the message is not as strong as I think that it was in Get Out. And in terms of how this film works in the horror tradition, Get Out subverted a lot of tropes in horror. Whereas this one, like I said before, almost pays homage to it. It embodies more tropes. It plays it more as a traditional sort of film. And that's why I said I think it's more homage than it is retread, because I don't think it's biting off of anybody. And it's not straight up copying any one particular film, even though the Strangers vibe for real, right? And then, but there are some other things that I've heard other critics bring up in terms of narrative when they were talking about like not narrative, visuals. When they were talking about like the visual cues to The Shining, the visual cues to Thriller, things like that. Okay, yeah, I can kind of pick up on that, and I've read Jordan Peele, what his the comments he made about Michael Jackson, about how Michael Jackson is sort of like the master of duality, and how that could play into the visuals of the film. I can kind of see all of that, but I still think that even if all of that was true, and even if all of that was intentional, which I think it probably was intentional, the film as a whole still plays to traditional horror tropes, especially when you're talking about the home invasion slash mass killer slash slasher. When you talk about the slasher genre, it still is traditional, and it's respectful, and it's representative of those things. So with that being said, not as good as Get Out, but it is still a very good starter film if you are not big into horror. If you're not a horror buff, this film is still good for you. It's still good. And definitely worth owning. And you know what? If you are a horror buff, this does belong in your collection. If you're a completist, where where you collect horror films, this belongs in your collection. It is a good addition to said genres and said subgenres. So yeah, it's not a bad film, not bad at all. If I was to give it a grade, which, dude, I'm so inconsistent in terms of delivering grades. I'm not inconsistent on how I grade. I'm inconsistent on giving grades to films in the first place. This is probably the first movie in a very long time I've actually given a grade to. But if I had to give a grade to a film working off of the 4-star system, $2.75. So because I think and y'all bear with me on this. When I say 2.75, because I think it's better than 2.5, but it's not 3. And if you're if you're thinking about that in terms of like an academic grading scale, if 4 stars is an A, 3 stars is a B, and C stars is and 2 stars is a C. 2.75, that's a C plus, B minus, right? C plus to B minus. And that's where I think this film that's where I would put this one. Yeah. Better than a 2.5, but not as good as a 3. So 2.75, that's where I would put this one. All right, so now I'm going to say for the next 5 to 10 minutes, let's go ahead, let's move over to the chat. Let's check out some of the questions. So priority wise, number 1, super chats get top priority. Number 2, questions about the film specifically. And then after that, I'll go ahead and just answer some general questions that people might have. Let's go ahead and let's head over to the chat, ladies and gents. All right. So right now we got 16 people watching. We got 15 likes. I appreciate that, guys. Thanks for coming out today. Really do appreciate that. So let's see what we're looking at. All right. Let's see. Wow. Okay. We got a pretty good discussion going on between some of the viewers in the chat. That's really good because I mean, once again, that's the whole point of this channel is to get people to get the networking going on. Since when is Get Out a satirical horror comedy? I don't know about horror comedy, but it is a satirical horror film. Because like I say, it subverts traditional tropes of horror. Get Out subverts some tropes while reinforcing others. It's satirical in its social commentary. But I know that question wasn't directed at me. My man AJ is in the building. AJ, remind me before, you know what? Hang on. I'm about to do this right now. Yeah, AJ, I just set you up as a moderator for the channel. Oh snap, Espa is in the building. We're gonna go ahead. We're gonna give him the wrench as well. He's gonna be a moderator. Oh snap. Thanks, AJ. I appreciate that $2 super chat, homie. Gave this film a 2 out of 10 on IMDb. I think that's harsh. Yeah, like I said, man, 2.75. You're talking about on a 10-point scale, man. That would be like yeah, we're talking about a 75. Yeah. I'd get like a 7.5. I'd give it yeah, I'd give us a 7.5. I think bare minimum it's a 7, but it's not as good as an 8. So yeah, halfway, 7.5. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, most of the chat is the debate between some of the viewers. Yeah, you got to do some Q&A with spoilers after this review part. Larry, you're the last person to see this movie. Just talk spoilers. Well, I mean, yeah, because the film's been out since the film came out in what, February? There's a bit of suspension of disbelief involved for sure. Okay, so see, Scott, that's the thing. You have to suspend disbelief because as soon as you start taking what's given to us in the film as literal, with that twist, the internal logic doesn't hold up. Let's see. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Upper middle class because they own a summer house. That is true. But that was also Addie's childhood home. So keep that in mind as well. That was an inherited house. Let's see. So the film isn't message heavy because it's so I don't want to call it vague. What's the term I'm looking for? It's not vague and it's not ambiguous because you can put two and two together. Like I said, the film is not hard to follow, but how do I put this? Because it's not vague and it's not ambiguous. Because we can piece it together. It's the but it does let you kind of figure it out on your own. So because of that, I can't go as far as to say that it's message heavy, because I don't think it is. I think I think on paper it was supposed to be, but execution wise, it's not. No, it's not scary. It's not scary at all. Let's see. Man, it's really, really good. Really good discussion going on in the film. You guys are reviewing it right along with me. This is awesome. Let's see. Hang on a minute. This is a good one. Why is it that the doppelgangers were only controlled by their human counterparts when the plot needed it? You notice that too, right? Especially with the son. Yeah, yeah. See, bruh. Yeah, yeah. See, yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, yep, okay. I don't see any questions. Scott, I see the comment that was hit and I just unhit it. Because I thought it was a good question. Actually, I think that the film suggests that that is why Red was the leader. I think because if you go back to what Red when that the reveal scene, yeah, I think that is what that was supposed to mean. Okay, so Scott, I'm gonna show your comment, the one that was hit as well. And you know what's funny, Scott? I don't think the film pulled that off. About when you talk about the themes that are working in the film, I don't that's one of the problems I had with the film. I don't think they did that successfully. I don't think they did. Because once again, it has to be one or the other, right? We know what caused the tether to be there in the first place. And what you just brought up, that's not how they got there. That's not how that's not what that is. All right, I think I'm almost okay. It's not helpful to point out obvious impossible stuff in an impossible supernatural horror movie. But that's the thing, Scott. I don't think it is impossible. I don't think it is. Well, hold on. Damn it, Scott. You're gonna make me talk about spoilers. All right, Scott, look, let me talk to you, bro. I don't know if there is supposed to be supernatural elements in the film because the premise of the film is based off of science fiction, not the supernatural. Those are two different things because both of those subgenres operate off of different laws and different physics. They don't use the supernatural to explain stuff away. That's why I said the film messed that up. They messed that up because they're incorporating elements of both science fiction and the supernatural. And that's not easy to do. That's why I said my man Hugo, he usually says pick one or the other. Don't try to do both. Because if you do both, there's a very good chance you're gonna create a contrivance because the laws of those subgenres conflict with each other. I don't think Us is supernatural. I don't think it is. Because the second you start telling me that it's supernatural, now I have to start questioning a bunch of the other material we were given in the film. So it can't be both. It can't be both. It can't be both. All right. So not to make this too much longer, we're getting ready to come up on the top of the hour. So for the next 5 minutes, I'm just going to skim through the chat and see if we have any questions specifically. So if you have any, get them in now. Once again, Super Chat has top priority. Any questions pertaining specifically to this film have second priority, and then we'll get down with any others. So isn't the best way to fix these problems by standing together as a human race. But that's the thing, though. We all have different wants, needs, and desires. And those wants, needs, and desires conflicts with other people's wants, needs, and desires. That's why I said there's no such thing as a utopia. There's no such thing as a perfect utopian society. By our very nature of being human, we will never experience one. We can get as close as we can to it, but we will never experience an absolute utopian society. It will never happen. Conflict is inherent in the human condition. Okay, so Stabby Mac stab with your moral of the story. This film doesn't pull out, but doesn't pull that state. If that's the moral of the story, nah. I think I could look to Metropolis as delivering that message much better than this film did. But Larry, what if I can't help the less fortunate when I can't even make my own life better? Well, dude, you can help. You can help the less fortunate with nothing. Jesus wasn't a baller. I'm gonna say that again. Jesus was not a baller. You do not have to have resources. You do not have to have great resources to help other people. Just share what you do have. I mean, dude, like I do not make a lot of money and I still donate $20 a month to a children's art program. And that's only 200 and what was that, $240 for the year, you know. By and large, dude, I'm fine financially, but I'm not doing any big things, you know what I'm saying? But I still find, I'm still able to give $20 a month to those kids. Volunteer your time. Actually, I would argue that time is a greater benefit than financial, because time is the one commodity you can never get back. It's the one resource you'll never get back. Let's see. All right. What else do we have? Um, I loved on the second viewing noticing the 11:11 parallels. Yeah, I actually looked up the what is it, Jeremiah 11:11, the sign that the guy on the beach kept holding up, and I read what that means, and I'm like, okay, you know, let's see. Seeing how well Jordan Peele is doing these dark films has me very curious on what he would do with a live action Gargoyles film. I hope Disney reconsiders letting him do it. I heard that was I think that he just said he'd be interested. That like that's a project he'd be interested in doing. But last I heard, that's just based off of him making that comment in an interview. Like I haven't heard like anything from the studio actually considering anything like that. I think that'd be, but you know what, dude? I mean, Disney's remaking everything, dude. Of all the properties that they own that they're remaking, Gargoyles is one that you actually could do something really interesting with. In talking about like in talk about film, and talk about what we can do on television. I mean, dude, you could do some really interesting stuff with that premise. Rabbit Carriage, can you recommend some Godfather level movies? The Godfather. I mean, there are some classics. I mean, The Godfather, um, uh, The Shining, Stanley Kubrick, The Shining. Man, when you talk about some of the greatest, some of the greatest film. I mean, 2001, uh, which is also Kubrick. Um, man, greatest films ever made. Shit. I talked about Metropolis earlier. Oh shit, man. Kurosawa, Yojimbo, um, Seven Samurai, um, Throne of Blood, and those are Japanese films. I don't know. I might do a live stream talking about like what I consider to be like the greatest films of all time. I don't know if I'm going to do a list because that's so difficult to do. That's so difficult. I mean, I consider The Godfather to be the greatest film ever made, but I'm talking about parts one and two together, and I'm totally biased. It would take an entire live stream just for me to break down all the reasons why I think The Godfather is the greatest film ever made. But that is totally open for debate as well, because there are so many counter arguments that can be made. Also, the biggest question: where are the guns? Uh, Hunter x Hunter Ant Arc review spoilers coming soon. So I am going to be doing a complete Hunter x Hunter 2011 anime review. It will probably be another live stream. It won't be out before July because I fell behind on some of my videos for June. So and I still got other videos planned for the rest of this month. So it'll be out next month at the earliest, but it wouldn't be out before July. But a full Hunter x Hunter review is is coming. What are your overall thoughts on Jordan Peele, as in like or dislike him? I love Jordan Peele. I think he is a fantastic creator. I think he is phenomenal. I think he is. And that's why I would probably say I was so critical of Us, because once again, just like I was with Winston Duke, right? I know what Peele is capable of now. I think Peele showed his hand with Get Out, man. That dude, and of course with Twilight Zone, which I still need to check out, but I know what that dude is capable of. And like I said, Us is not bad compared to Get Out. It's not as good, but that's because Get Out was just so good, right? So he, in my opinion, he hasn't made a bad movie yet. Well, hang on, let me take that back. Well, no, I didn't see the movie about the dog. I didn't see but I don't think Jordan Peele did that movie. I think that was directed by somebody else. But I didn't see the one about the dog. I didn't see that one, so I can't talk about that one. But based off of the two films that I've seen that he has made, both of them are good. It's just that Get Out is just so much better. But I love Jordan Peele. He's a great, fantastic creator. Also, favorite TV shows. Wait, hang on. Which show is better, Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad, and why is Breaking Bad better? But you assume I was going to say Breaking Bad because you follow that up with why is Breaking Bad better? That's funny. You assumed I was going to say Breaking Bad is better than Game of Thrones. Actually, the truth is, I don't even think I can qualitatively say that because I have not finished either show. I haven't finished either one. I'm on the last season of Breaking Bad, and I stopped watching Game of Thrones after season 4. Jordan Peele is producing Candyman, but I don't think he's directing it, and I don't know if he's writing it. He's producing it. His company, Monkey Paw Productions, is producing that film, but I don't think he's involved in writing or directing it. From what I heard he was just a producer. I'm waiting for a Candyman remake though, dude. That was one of my favorite horror movies growing up. Mainly because it was set in New Orleans. All right. Well, so it is 6 after the hour. So I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead because I don't want to make this one too long. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap this one up. Once again, I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining me again tonight. Once again, I want to go ahead and I want to thank Jonathan R., OAW Blockbuster patron, for this request. I hope I did your request justice, dude. I really do. I hope I did it justice. Because when I got down to writing about this film, when I started making my notes, I'm like, dude, I got a lot of stuff to talk about. So I appreciate that. And once again, for those of you all who have yet to do so, the link is in the description box below. Check out the OAW Patreon page. Check out the tiers. If there is a tier that interests you, please pledge, get your request in. Like I said, with the Blockbuster tier, the way that one works is for just $30, you can request either a 2-hour movie, and if it's longer than 2 hours, me and you will message each other. We'll work something out. Typically, for $30, that's between 2 and 2.5 hours, right? If it's like a 3-hour movie or something like that, I'll still check it out. The only thing I might ask is like throw an extra $5 on it or something like that. So instead of 30, it'll be like 35, something like that, right? But if it's longer, just let me know. We'll work something out. Don't worry about that. But essentially, the way it's set up at the $30 tier, that is a 2 to a 2.5 hour movie, 2 episodes of a 1-hour TV show, or 4 episodes of a 30-minute TV show or anime, either one, right? And you get to request that for review. At the $25 tier, that is the pull list tier. That's when you can request 3 issues of an American comic or the first 2 to 3 chapters of a manga based on length. It depends on the length. You can request that. Let's see. My $20 tier is my Advice Corner tier, which is essentially my private hangout session. $15 tier is Discussion of the Week, where I will talk about a topic that you want addressed on the channel. I'll talk about that. $10 tier, that's the producer tier, where you get a producer credit That's going to be in the credits of my videos. I'm working on some things right now. That tier might change because I'm working on some things right now in terms of the format on the channel. I'm going to be doing a lot more hangouts, and I'm going to be doing less pre-recorded videos. So that tier, you'll still get to see your name credited, but it's not going to be the way I originally intended. For the pre-recorded videos, it will be, but for the hangouts, it's going to be done differently. But since, we don't have anybody at the $10 tier yet, so I haven't ran into that yet. Because for all of my patrons, $15 or higher, you get an on-camera shout out. So that's how you get credited. But for the ones just at that $10 tier, haven't had it happen yet, but when people start pledging to that tier and the name, you guys will start seeing those patrons' names. It's going to be displayed differently, but I have an idea of how I want to do that. At the $5 tier, which is one of the most popular ones right now, that is the Vote Keeper tier. That is the access to the Patreon exclusive material, and that's the access to the OAW Vote, which is the original Otaku Assemble weekly group videos, anime and manga reviews that we did way back when. The Vote Keeper tier, you get access to those videos. And then finally, at the $1 tier, you get early access to any YouTube uploads. I know I haven't been offering anything at that tier this month. And I'll just be honest with you guys. I have had some technical difficulties. Long story short, I don't have the Adobe Cloud anymore. I was using Photoshop for all of my thumbnails, and I was using Adobe Premiere for all of my video editing. I don't have access to either right now. So I've kind of had to rely on the live streaming because I can't edit any pre-recorded video. So if I was to do pre-recorded material, it would be unedited, raw footage. I know I've done that in the past, but for certain things, I'm like, you know what, dude, if I'm going to do it raw and off the cuff, I'd rather do it in real time. I'd rather do it as a live stream. But so that's why there has not been any pre-recorded material on the channel this month. That being said, currently I am working on a workaround. I am working on I'm looking at some other video software, some other editing software. But even with that being said, what I'm thinking about doing right now is if I do any pre-recorded material moving forward, it's only going to be for the Patreon requests. So like this would be pre-recorded, like that my last Dragon review would have been pre-recorded if it wasn't for the technical difficulty, because that's when it first started. It started with the last Dragon review, and I was like, okay, well, let me see if I can figure this out, and then boom, it was full blown. Yep, can't use either program anymore. So but like I said, I'm currently working on a workaround with that. And because I'm thinking of changing up the format, I am thinking of making some changes to the tiers. But anyway, if you all have requests that you want for reviews, you gotta get them in before the end of the month, because the way I do them is on the first of the month. That's when your request actually gets locked in for fulfillment later in the month. But if your request isn't in, let's say you want a movie review, you want one done in July, well, you have to get your request in before July 1st. Because if it's not in before July 1st, and let's say you get it in on like the 13th, I can't fulfill that until after August 1st. So if you want to get those requests in, go ahead, lock them in now. Currently, there is only one spot remaining for the blockbuster tier. So there's only one left. And once that one is in, it's come the first, it's going to be locked in. Because like I said, I think my 3 previous blockbuster patrons are renewing for next month as well. So they'll have requests for the following month too. So anybody who wants to get in afterwards is going to have to let me know so I can open up spots for the blockbuster tier. It's kind of funny, man. That tier is a lot more popular than I thought it would be. It's filling up. So like I said, if you guys want to get those requests in, today is the 22nd. So we are approaching the deadline for July. Did you take martial arts classes way back then? I used to. I used to practice Taekwondo, and I practiced it at two different phases in life. Once when I was young, and then once as an adult, and at two different dojans, two different sabonims, which are dojans are the studios. Sabonim is the instructor. So I've studied under. Technically speaking, I've studied under 5 because the school I used to go to when I was young had 4 masters, and the one I went to as an adult had, but technically I had 2 there too because I had a student master. So technically I did have, but the sabonim is always the top of the school, so I had 2 sabonims. All right, Scott, appreciate that. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead. We're going to wrap this one up. Once again, check out the OAW Patreon. Link is in the description box below. If you all are interested in any tiers, get it. Hey, and if you got any requests, get them in before July 1st. If you want that request fulfilled in July. Jonathan, my man, if you are watching this, I got to get with you, right? I got to get with you for, if you're renewing again for July, I got to get with you for your request for July. So the cool thing is once you become a patron, it auto renews. Like I said, the request isn't locked in until the 1st of the month, but I still like to hit up my patrons so I can sort of anticipate what the review might be. For one of my blockbuster patrons, for my blockbuster patron, 00 Soldier, who requested The Last Dragon for this month, like I already got his for like the next 2 to 3 months, right? And like I say, those don't get locked in until the 1st of the month, but I still like to have a list, you know what I'm saying? So I know what to anticipate. And once again, I'm gonna go ahead and double down on this. If you all have not seen us yet, if you haven't seen the film, I still recommend you at least checking it out once. So it is available now on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital. If you're not sure you want to buy it, by all means, go ahead and rent it. Sure. I think if you are a horror buff, I think it does belong in your collection somewhere. And if you're just getting into horror, it's definitely a good starter, especially if you're like, if you haven't seen The Strangers, if you haven't seen what's the one with the one in the hotel? It's not Hostel. What's the one in the hotel with Kate Beckinsale and Luke Wilson? What is that one called? Man, I keep forgetting the name of that one. If you haven't seen that one, there are certain films I can point out. Like if you haven't seen those, this is not a bad place to start. Like I would probably recommend checking this one out first. But so anyway, with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Editor-in-Chief. I want to thank you all again for joining me again tonight, and I will catch you all with the next video. And with that being said, peace.